At exactly 9 o'clock on the morning of February 26, 1945, a 19-year-old Marine lay pressed against jagged volcanic stone on the western face of a hill that had already consumed hundreds of lives. Private First Class Douglas Thomas Jacobson had dirt ground into his uniform, sweat streaking through layers of black ash on his face, and the sound of heavy automatic fire echoing through his ears. Ahead of him, no more than a few dozen yards away, a Japanese 20mm anti-aircraft gun was ripping the ground apart with merciless precision. The Marines advancing toward it had no chance. 2 men assigned to carry a bazooka had just tried to move forward. They were cut down almost instantly. Their weapon lay abandoned in the open, half buried in ash, unreachable by any man who hoped to survive. Jacobson was barely old enough to vote. He had already fought through 3 island campaigns, yet he carried no medals, no recognition, no rank beyond private first class. Just a rifle, a helmet, and a body already exhausted by days of unrelenting combat. Before the war, his life had been quiet and ordinary. He worked as a draftsman for his father in Port Washington, New York. Summers were spent guarding swimmers along the beaches of Long Island, scanning the surf instead of enemy positions. At 17, he had lied about his age to enlist, driven by a belief that the war needed him more than home ever would. Now he was part of Company I, 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines, 4th Marine Division, pinned down on what many Marines had begun calling a slaughterhouse rather than a hill. The place was Hill 382, a rise of land that dominated the northern sector of Iwo Jima. The island itself measured only 8 square miles, but it had been transformed into a killing ground. 5 days earlier, nearly 30,000 Marines had stormed ashore expecting resistance, but not this. Intelligence had failed catastrophically. Instead of defending the beaches, the Japanese commander, Lieutenant General Tadamaki Kuribayashi, had spent 8 months turning the island into a fortress. 18 kilometers of tunnels ran beneath the volcanic crust. Concrete bunkers, camouflaged artillery, buried tanks, and mutually supporting positions covered every approach. Hill 382 stood as the keystone of that entire system, anchoring defenses north of Mount Suribachi. If it held, everything behind it held. If it fell, the Japanese line would begin to unravel. The Marines had learned quickly why the area was known as the meat grinder. In the 7 days since landing, the 23rd Marines had been cut nearly in half. Company after company had assaulted Hill 382, only to be torn apart by fire from positions no bombardment seemed capable of destroying. Naval guns had pounded the area. Battleship shells weighing over a ton had slammed into the slope. Bombs had cratered the ash. Yet when the Marines advanced, Japanese gunners waited patiently, allowing them to cross open ground before opening fire from bunkers that still stood. Sherman tanks burned. Flamethrower operators died before reaching their targets. Entire squads disappeared into clouds of ash and smoke, never to rise again. Hill 382 itself rose roughly 125 feet above the surrounding terrain. Its summit had been carved into a maze of bunkers, firing pits, and reinforced shelters connected by tunnels. Anti-tank guns covered the approaches. Machine guns flanked every possible route. Light tanks sat concealed in natural crevices, invisible until they fired. At the base of the slope, the 20mm gun swept the ground like a scythe. Every Marine who tried to move forward was met with devastating fire. Jacobson watched as the bazooka team fell. The loader collapsed first, the canvas bag of rockets spilling into the ash. The gunner dropped seconds later, the launcher sliding from his hands. The anti-aircraft gun continued firing. 3 more Marines were hit almost immediately. Company I was frozen in place. Without that gun destroyed, the attack would fail again. 17 men were already dead, 26 wounded, and the fight had barely begun. The enemy remained mostly unseen. Riflemen hid in pits carved into the ash. Machine guns were camouflaged beneath earth and stone. Every shadow might conceal death. Jacobson's eyes fixed on the bazooka lying exposed between lines of fire. The weapon was designed for 2 men, one to aim and fire, the other to load rockets and connect the ignition wire. Operating it alone was dangerous, slow, and almost unheard of. The back blast alone could seriously injure the gunner. Reloading under fire was nearly impossible without help. Another Marine tried to reach it. He made it less than 5 yards before a sniper dropped him. Jacobson did not wait for orders. He rose and moved. The ground offered no protection. Volcanic ash shifted beneath his boots, sliding with every step. The Japanese gunners tracked him immediately. Bullets cracked through the air close enough to feel. He reached the bazooka, grabbed the steel tube, slung the remaining rockets over his shoulder, and ran. The weapon weighed 13 pounds. Each rocket added another 11. Nearly 70 pounds in total, carried across open ground under fire. He dove behind shattered rock 30 yards from the gun. Dust coated his face. The metal tube burned hot from the sun. He had never fired a bazooka alone, but there was no one else left. Training replayed in his mind as he worked. Insert the rocket. Connect the wire. Check the back blast. Fire. The Japanese gun crew adjusted their aim. Jacobson shouldered the launcher, rose from cover, and squeezed the trigger. Fire and smoke erupted from both ends of the tube. The rocket streaked forward and struck the gun's shield squarely. The explosion obliterated the position. The gun and its crew vanished in a flash of flame. For the first time that morning, Company I moved. Jacobson dropped flat and reloaded alone, slower than any trained team. Machine guns higher up the slope opened fire, cutting down more Marines as they advanced. Jacobson spotted the muzzle flashes, maneuvered, and destroyed each position one by one, firing rockets at close range, diving for cover as bullets tore through the air where he had been moments before. He moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. A reinforced blockhouse blocked the route to the summit. Artillery had failed to destroy it. Jacobson flanked it, blasted open the rear entrance with his last rocket, and followed with grenades, silencing the defenders inside. When his ammunition ran out, he ran back through fire to resupply. Mortars bracketed him as he sprinted. Sniper rounds cracked past his head. Again and again, he returned uphill, each time carrying rockets meant for 2 men, each time attacking positions that had slaughtered entire platoons. Pillboxes fell. Machine gun nests were erased. Mortar pits vanished in fire and smoke. Japanese defenders' confirmed kills climbed steadily. Marines who had been pinned down rose and followed the path he cut. By mid-morning, Jacobson reached the final defensive ring below the summit, 6 interlocking positions designed to stop any advance. He had fewer rockets than targets. He chose carefully, eliminating observation posts first, then the weapons that threatened his fellow Marines the most. When rockets ran out, he used grenades and rifle fire. When his rifle emptied, he kept moving. At one point, a Japanese light tank emerged, grinding its way up the slope toward advancing Marines. Jacobson engaged it alone, disabling it with 1 rocket, then destroying it with another fired into the engine compartment. Flames consumed the vehicle as its crew died attempting to escape. Exhausted, dehydrated, bruised, and nearly deaf from repeated blasts, Jacobson climbed toward the final blockhouse on Hill 382. It had survived everything thrown at it. He circled to the rear under rifle fire, blasted the entrance with his last rocket, then charged inside with grenades and rifle, clearing it room by room in brutal close combat. By the time he emerged, the hill was effectively broken. Behind him, Marines surged forward. By noon, the summit was in American hands. The Japanese defensive system that had held for days collapsed in hours. Hill 382 had fallen. Jacobson walked down the slope later that afternoon, carrying an empty bazooka tube. A Navy corpsman examined him and found only cuts, bruises, and severe dehydration. When asked how he had done it, Jacobson said he didn't know. He only knew he wanted off that hill. The battle for Iwo Jima would continue for weeks. Thousands more would die. But Hill 382 was the turning point, and one 19-year-old Marine had made it happen. Douglas Jacobson would receive the Medal of Honor later that year from President Harry Truman. He would re-enlist, become an officer, serve for decades, and live a quiet life afterward, rarely speaking of what he had done. He died in 2000 and was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Hill 382 stands today as ground paid for in blood, taken by a Marine who refused to stop moving when everyone else was pinned down. 16 positions destroyed. 75 enemies eliminated. 1 Marine operating a weapon meant for 2. History almost forgot him. Now it won't.